All right, so I've modified our document here just a little bit. We're going to run through each one of these steps here and then take note of the hash and kind of talk about what's going on. But at the same time, I'm going to kind of modify our little amazing illustration here. I've taken all the hashes off. In fact, we're kind of in a nowhere state at this moment. We haven't done anything. There are no commits. There is no history. So this is kind of to represent nothingness. Okay. So, all right. So let's run the touch command, and I'm going to make our files. They're going to be HTML, just because that's kind of what we do in this on this channel is mostly web related stuff. So hopefully we can use that as to give you a good idea of why Git's great. So let's do touch index.html. And there you go. So, and if you didn't watch our last our basics on bash topics, touch just basically creates a file. So if we look at our directory listing, we now have a file called index.html. If we run git status and spell it right, you now see our status has changed because up here said what branch we're on. We'll get to that later. But it says we're got nothing to commit. So now it realized we have an untracked file that needs to be added to the repository. And I say needs, doesn't need to be, but if you want it to be part of the repository, you need to add it. And by add, I mean actually add and commit. Because remember, add is actually just adding to the staging area. So let's do that first. Let's add, so we've created the file. Actually, let's mark off. Yeah, we did that one. Let's add this to staging. So git add. And here's a quick tip for bash if you're not familiar. You can type in part of a file name, and if it can find something like it, it will go ahead and spit it out for you if you hit tab. So we're going to do git add, which means add to staging, and then the file we're going to add. Okay, so we've now added it. Let's mark that off our list. And like I said, we're going to use git status quite a bit. So here we go, git status. All right, now, instead of it being untracked, meaning it's not part of the repository doesn't care about it, it is now added to the staging area and ready to be committed. So let's do that then. So git commit, and this is where the message part comes in, and it's if you're doing running Git on your own, I believe you can get away with not adding a message. I highly do not recommend that. If you're doing this with a company or a team, the messages are very important, and likely a company will that'll be a requirement to put a message in there. But as annoying as it is and tedious, it is very important, even if it's just simple. So to put a message in, we do the message flag or the -m, and then in quotes, something like that. Our change was so simple that a simple, message like this is good. Now we're going to enter. And there you go. We've made our first commit. Now you'll possibly see this message here. These are some of those things I was telling you about in that .git directory that can be changed via the command line. Right now, I don't even remember where it's getting my name from. I think a global configuration, but it's going to make the name, the ID of the person committing my name. But if I wanted to do it be a little more specific and I wanted to put in my email address and things like that, I could do that with this config editor here. But we're going to leave that be for now. Most important thing is that we have now made a commit. So let's mark that off. All right, now let's find out what the hash is. So we're going to run git log. And there you go. Here's our hash. Now, those not familiar with Bash, the normal Windows copy and paste shortcuts don't work the same. Control C will give you a much different result, so don't do that. But I'm going to right click, copy, and we'll just paste it up here. So now we have our commit. Now I'm just going to take the first 6 characters as our reference down here. I'm going to copy this. All right, so there's our first commit. And because we have made the commit, we have moved our playhead up. And this is now where we are in time. And remember, these don't actually exist. They're only there for visual reference at the moment. Only this and everything behind it exists. Now, not to get off on a tangent here, but if we did have more commits and we moved back, then there may be commits further down the road and some down here, blah, 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 because we've moved around on the timeline. But right now we're at the very last thing done. Okay, so really quick, let's take a look at this log entry. Nothing too crazy. The commit, the hash, who did it, when, and the message we left. So good to go. Now let's run git status. It says nothing to commit. Everything is clean. So we haven't done anything. There's nothing has changed. So now let's move forward. Let's do some changes. Let's go ahead. I'm going to open the file. So I've pulled up Windows Explorer and I've gone to my directory here, and we're going to open it up in Notepad++. You're going to open it in whatever you want to. Whatever you can use to edit it is fine. Okay. So we have it open. Let's add something. Let's add the basic HTML tag and give it a little bit of space. And actually, let's just make a real basic template here. Then the head and the body. This is not going to be really a legitimate document. Okay. So let's save that and go back over here to Bash, git status. There you go. Now, instead of it saying new file or something to be something untracked, we don't have that message because everything that we've worked on is tracked. This file is now part of the repository, and now it's noticing that it's been modified. So that's good. Let's go ahead and we'll add that to staging because we're done with that. So git add index, and now it is added. If we did git status, you can see that it's now ready to be committed. We're good to go on that, but we're not ready to make that commit. We're going to add some other things to this this commit. Let's create a CSS file. So touch style.css. So now we have a new file called style.css. Git status. You can see changes to be committed. That's what we already did. But now we have an untracked file. I want this to be added in with the next commit, so we need to add it to our repository. Git, and adding to staging will do that. Style.css. There you go. Git status. Now you can see nothing, or everything is ready to commit. There's nothing that needs to be added to stages. There's nothing that's untracked. The status we are in now is good to go. Let's go ahead and commit. Actually, we forgot to mark our things off here. So we changed something, possibly changed another thing. We added them to staging. Now we're going to commit. And let's say git commit message. And we'll say added basic HTML to index. And created a CSS doc. Explanatory enough. We're going to hit enter, and maybe I'm overstating this, but what we're doing now is we're taking only the things that have been put into staging and committing them to the repository. So enter. There you go. Now it looks like we're going to keep getting this message. I'm going to ignore this. It has no bearing on what we're doing at the moment. The most important thing is that you see that things were changed. It happened. Now we can go to git log. And now we see both of our commits here. Now we have a new hash to copy here. Let's put that here. And again, for reference, we're just gonna take the first 6. So we have a new place and time, and we have moved to that place and time because that's where we are. Let's go ahead and get status. All right, we're good to go. We'll mark off this. All right, so now we've moved ahead in history, or create another point in history anyways. And let's just do one more change here. And we'll go over here to our HTML. Let's go ahead and link our CSS doc. And that's not a totally legit way to do it, but just for example. So we've made that change. I've saved it. Now let's take a look at our status. See that it knows that we modified index from the last point in time. Now, the amount of times I'm doing git status, you'll probably do half as much. I'm doing this to just make sure that you know where we are as we go. But as you get more comfortable with Git, it's still good to run that as much as you want because it does tell you where you are. But you should have a good idea of what you've done and where you're at once you get more familiar with Git. So we have that change. Let's go ahead and open our CSS doc. We'll just put something arbitrary in here. Save that. So we've made one change, made another change. Let's do git status. And there you go. So again, no new files, so nothing untracked. It knows that these 2 files have been modified. Now I want to add them to staging. In the last example, we added them one by one. But if at this point we know we definitely want to put both of these in the commit, we can add all. So we could do git add, and you can either do the dot, which works most of the time. If you're just doing modified documents, if you're adding things to the repository, just do -- all. So if all else fails, do -- all. In this case, dot will work. There you go. Git status. Those 2 files have been added now, or those changes have been added to the staging area. We are ready to commit one more time. So let's mark this off. Git commit message linked CSS in index. and added rule to style. There we go. Git log. Now we have another commit hash. We can add that to our timeline here. And we move the playhead forward. And this is where we are in history. So this is a real basic and common workflow when you're working on a repository, especially a local one. There are some more things when you're working with a more centralized repository where you're doing some changes and committing them, and other people maybe on your team elsewhere are doing things and changing them. Then you need to make sure that you're staying current with the central repository. But when working on something yourself, just for your own version control needs, right now, this workflow works great.